Welcome to the Library of Alexandra, where we explore strange books and powerful ideas without pretending that reading them is always easy. Because let's be honest, we all want to be the kind of person who reads every night, annotates beautifully, and understands philosophy on the first try. But life gets busy. So that's what this is. A space where we break down big, complicated books into something digestible, meaningful, and actually enjoyable. If that sounds like your kind of library, make sure you like and subscribe. And before you go, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. I love seeing how far these ideas travel. And finally, send this video to someone who keeps saying, I should really read more. This is their sign.
Hello, and welcome. Yes, you. I'm talking directly to you. Whether you are, prepping for a massive meeting, commuting through a crowded city, or just sitting at home being insanely curious about the intricacies of the world, we are thrilled you're here with us.
Absolutely.
Settle in, get comfortable, and open your mind. Today's deep dive is an exploration of a perspective that challenges almost everything we take for granted about how we live our lives.
It really does.
We are taking a profound journey together, just the three of us, into a stack of excerpts from Gary Zukav's landmark work, The Seat of the Soul.
Yeah.
Our mission today is to explore the blueprint for what this material calls the next stage of human evolution. We are looking at a monumental proposed shift from living purely through our five senses to awakening our fully multisensory potential.
It really is a sweeping framework. When you read through these excerpts, you immediately realize that this isn't just a traditional philosophy text. And it isn't just a conventional spiritual guide either. It attempts to ground the conversation in a way that bridges the gap between quantum physics, modern psychology, and ancient spiritual traditions.
It's ambitious.
Very. It takes these seemingly disparate fields and weaves them together to explain the very mechanics of human existence and human suffering.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I have to tell you, reading this material completely flips the script on what it means to be powerful.
Right, our whole definition of it.
Exactly. We think we know what power is. We see it every day. It's money, it's status, it's physical strength.
Dominating a boardroom.
Yes, or winning an argument on social media, or commanding a battlefield. But the core argument here is that our entire operating definition of power is entirely obsolete.
It's not just wrong, it's actually the root cause of our collective and individual suffering.
Right. Over the course of this deep dive, we are going to lay out a grounded summary of the text, dig into the key insights, and explore the deeper philosophical meanings.
We'll also make some fascinating connections to science and modern society.
And eventually, we are going to wade into some of the more mysterious, deeply mystical elements hidden within these pages.
There is an immense amount of ground to cover. The worldview presented here challenges the very foundation of how we perceive our daily reality.
It really does. Let's start right at the foundation. I want to break down this fundamental premise in plain language.
Sure.
For as long as human history has been recorded, our evolution has been framed almost entirely around physical survival. We all know the phrase, survival of the fittest.
Right. Darwinian logic.
Exactly. It's the idea that the organism best able to control its environment and to, outcompete the other organisms in that environment is the most evolved and the most successful. And this entire system relies strictly on the five senses. What can you see, hear, taste, touch, and smell? What can you physically manipulate to ensure you stay alive and comfortable?
And in this framework, that pursuit is labeled as the pursuit of external power.
External power. Let's define that.
Well, the five-sensory human pursues external power by seeking to dominate their environment. That looks like accumulating wealth, climbing social hierarchies using physical force.
Or even just emotional manipulation in a relationship.
Precisely. Using guilt to control a partner is a form of external power. But the crucial foundational argument is that this old system is breaking down. It was actively failing us.
Because it's based on fear.
Yes, the pursuit of external power is ultimately always based on fear. Think about the mechanics of it. If your power is external, it can be taken away.
Right. You can lose your money in a market crash.
Your social status can be ruined overnight by a scandal. Your physical strength will inevitably fade with age or illness.
So you're never actually secure.
Never. When your concept of power is tied to external things, you are in a constant state of vulnerability. That vulnerability breeds a deep, often unconscious fear, and that fear inevitably leads to violence, brutal competition, and destruction.
Both on a personal and a global scale. That makes a lot of sense when you look at the sheer anxiety that drives so much of modern life. We are exhausted from constantly guarding our external power.
Which brings us to the new paradigm this material proposes.
Right. The assertion is that humanity is currently in the midst of an evolutionary leap. We are evolving into the multisensory human,
This is the next step.
where instead of pursuing external power, we begin to pursue authentic power. The definition of authentic power here is quite striking. It defines it as the alignment of your personality with your immortal soul.
It is a power that cannot be bought,
It cannot be hoarded.
and it absolutely cannot be stolen by anyone else.
Yeah.
Furthermore, the claim is that an authentically empowered person is entirely incapable of making anyone a victim.
That's a huge statement.
It is. They are so strong and so secure in their internal alignment that using force or manipulation against another person isn't even a recognizable part of their consciousness.
That distinction is paramount. External power splinters us. It inherently creates winners and losers, victims and victimizers. It is a zero-sum game.
Authentic power, however, unifies. It loves life in every form and perceives deep meaning in the experiences of the earth rather than just seeing the earth as a resource to be exploited.
So the transition from the five-sensory human to the multi-sensory human is essentially the journey from seeking safety in the physical world through domination to finding absolute, unshakable security within.
Exactly.
That concept of the personality aligning with the soul transitions us perfectly into the key insights of the text. The first major insight is this stark, uncompromising distinction between the personality and the soul.
It really makes you stop and evaluate your entire self-concept.
We usually think of our personality as who we are. My humor, my anxieties, my ambitions, my quirks, that's me, right?
But this philosophy says the personality is just the part of you that is born, lives, and dies within time. It is intrinsically tied to the physical, five-sensory world.
It feels the heavy, dense emotions. Anger, fear, vengeance, shame, jealousy, cynical frustration.
It is the part of you that engages in that exhausting pursuit of external power we just talked about.
While the soul, on the other hand, is immortal and exists entirely outside of the construct of time, the soul only knows unconditional love, compassion, and wisdom.
The text describes the personality as an artificial vehicle. It's a persona.
A spacesuit.
Yes, a spacesuit created by the soul, specifically to interact with physical matter. The premise is that the soul has splintered aspects, parts of its own energy, that require healing, balancing, and growth.
Since the soul itself exists in a state of non-physical frequency, it creates the personality, complete with all its specific quirks, its glaring weaknesses, its unique talents, and its physical body, as the perfect custom-built instrument to enter the dense physical world.
It enters this world to interact with the matter and to heal those splintered aspects through experience.
So my personality isn't the totality of who I am, it's the temporary spacesuit my soul is wearing to do necessary work in this specific environment. If my spacesuit has a faulty dial, maybe I have a quick temper or a deep fear of abandonment that isn't a random curse. That is the exact configuration my soul needed to work through a specific energetic lesson.
Precisely. It radically shifts how you view your own perceived flaws and the flaws of others. You are not your anger. Your anger is just an energetic knot in the spacesuit that your soul is currently trying to untangle.
Which leads right into the second key insight, and this is where the spiritual concepts start to brush up against the mechanics of physical reality. The idea that intention shapes reality.
What's fascinating here is the assertion that physical matter is simply the densest level of light.
Okay, light with a capital L.
Yes, and thoughts, our internal consciousness, our intentions, are forms of light shaped by our awareness. Energy continually pours through you. You are not a static, closed biological system.
You are a dynamic being of energy.
And with every single thought, and more importantly, every single intention, you shape that energy. You set it into motion.
And the really confronting part is the argument that you create your reality strictly through your intentions, whether you are conscious of them or not.
This is where it gets very gritty for daily life.
Let's look at a relatable example. Let's say someone is actively trying to find a loving relationship. They go on dates.
They tell their friends they are ready to settle down.
They might even go to therapy to work on their communication skills. The words they are putting out into the world say, "I want connection."
But if their underlying unconscious intention is to protect themselves from being hurt,
Because maybe they have deep unhealed trauma.
their actual energetic output is fear and distance. And the universe, according to this framework, responds to the intention not the vocabulary.
Exactly. So this person will repeatedly find themselves in situations that result in painful separations and isolation. They will attract partners who are emotionally unavailable.
Or they will subconsciously sabotage the connection when it gets too close.
Right. They will look at the physical world and say, why does this keep happening to me? I'm doing everything right.
But the reality they created is perfectly reflecting their truest, deepest intention, which was protection and distance.
It demands an uncomfortable level of radical self-honesty. You have to trace your physical experiences backward to find the intention that created them.
If you are consistently experiencing hostility at work, you have to look inside and ask, where is the intention of hostility or extreme competition that I'm projecting?
You can't just blame the toxic workplace. You have to examine why your energy is locking into that specific dynamic.
This ties directly into the third key insight, which focuses on the evolution of relationships. Because if our core intentions are fundamentally shifting from physical survival to spiritual alignment, the very structures of our relationships must shift to accommodate that.
I found this part incredibly illuminating, especially looking at the state of modern relationships. The text draws a sharp contrast between the old archetype of marriage and the new archetype of what it calls spiritual partnership.
Think about the traditional archetype of marriage historically. It was fundamentally designed for physical survival.
It was a pragmatic pact. Two people came together to share resources, build a shelter, produce offspring to help work the land, and provide physical protection for one another in a very dangerous world.
It was an alliance based on survival, which is a pure, unadulterated reflection of external power and the five-sensory human.
And while people obviously still get married today, the argument is that the underlying archetype of that survival-based marriage is no longer appropriate for where we are evolving.
We aren't just trying to survive the winter anymore. We are trying to understand ourselves.
The emerging archetype is spiritual partnership. This is defined as a bond between equals specifically for the purpose of mutual spiritual growth. It is no longer about just surviving together, it is about evolving together.
And what does that look like practically? Because it sounds nice on paper, but how does a spiritual partnership handle an argument over doing the dishes compared to a traditional marriage?
Okay, let's play that out. In a survival-based marriage, the argument over the dishes is usually about fairness, control, and external power.
Right. I worked 10 hours today, you only worked 8, therefore you owe me this labor.
Yeah.
It's a transaction.
Or it's about avoiding conflict to keep the peace. So someone just bitterly does the dishes to maintain the physical stability of the household.
But in a spiritual partnership, the relationship requires total transparency. It requires facing your deepest vulnerabilities together.
If you are fiercely angry about the dishes, a spiritual partner doesn't just look at the dishes, they look at the energy.
They expose their own flaw. They might say, I am feeling an immense amount of anger right now, and I realize it's because my personality feels unvalued, and I'm projecting that onto this mundane chore.
You don't hide your messy, unhealed aspects to keep the peace. You bring them into the light so that your partner can help you see them clearly. The relationship becomes a crucible for authentic empowerment.
That makes an incredible amount of sense when you look at modern divorce rates and the profound dissatisfaction so many people feel in their relationships.
We are trying to force complex, multisensory, spiritually hungry individuals into a five-sensory survival construct. It's like trying to run modern software on a computer built in 1995. It's bound to fracture.
Exactly.
Now, let's wade a bit deeper. I want to transition into the deeper philosophical meaning of the text, starting with a concept that gets thrown around constantly in pop culture but is deeply misunderstood: the law of karma.
It is vital that we demystify karma, because the common cultural understanding of it is entirely at odds with what is being presented here.
In the West, we often view karma through the lens of a moral dynamic or a system of cosmic punishment.
We stub our toe and think, I did something bad yesterday, so the universe is punishing me.
It's a very anthropomorphic view, imagining a judge in the sky keeping a tally of our sins. But this philosophy is explicit. The universe does not judge.
Morality, the concepts of good and evil or right and wrong, are human creations born of the five-sensory mind. Karma is strictly an impersonal energy balancing system.
It is, quite literally, the physics of the soul.
The analogy provided to explain this really brings the reality of it home, though it is quite heavy. The premise is that every cause that hasn't produced an effect is an energetic imbalance waiting to be righted.
If a person takes advantage of others, they create an energy imbalance.
That imbalance must be righted by the experience of being taken advantage of, It's not a punishment. It's a physical law of energy-seeking equilibrium, much like water finding its level.
But the text doesn't shy away from the extreme implications of this. It gives the heavy example of a mother who loses a child or someone suffering a debilitating, painful illness.
It states that these individuals are balancing karmic energy from this or previous lifetimes. They are bringing an incomplete, lingering energy dynamic to a close.
And that is a profoundly difficult concept for the human personality to accept. It feels cold.
But from the perspective of the soul, it is the ultimate mechanism of healing. Which brings us to a highly challenging corollary concept, non-judgmental justice.
If karma is an impersonal, inescapable balancing of energy that sees everything and accounts for every single intention, then we as individuals do not need to be the judge and jury for the universe. The universe is already keeping perfect score.
And this reframes true justice entirely. The text points to historical figures like Gandhi and Christ as embodiments of this. They practiced non-judgmental justice.
We saw reality with all its brutality and unfairness without reacting with negative, destructive emotions.
Think about Gandhi. He was beaten nearly to death, yet he completely refused to prosecute his attackers. Why? Because from a multisensory perspective, he recognized they were acting out their own karmic ignorance.
He recognized that every soul is exactly where it needs to be for its own healing and learning, even if that place looks to our five senses like senseless suffering or cruelty.
It is the ultimate freedom. It is the freedom of seeing what you see without responding negatively. When you judge another person, when you say they are inherently bad or I am morally superior to them, you are creating new negative karma for yourself.
You are inserting your personality's fear, arrogance, and illusion of superiority into a massive, impersonal balancing process that you cannot possibly comprehend from your limited physical viewpoint.
Right.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. If the entire goal is to balance our existing karma and avoid creating new negative karma, what role does temptation play? Because we usually think of temptation as a trap.
We think of it as a flaw in our character, or a test designed to make us fail and rack up more bad karma.
This was one of the most brilliant reframings in the material. It completely flips our understanding of temptation. It calls temptation the Luciferic principle.
And it notes that the word Lucifer actually translates to light-bringer. It explains that temptation is not a trap. It is actually a highly compassionate tool of the universe.
It operates as a dress rehearsal for negative karma. Let's break that down. Temptation allows you to feel the intense, visceral pull of a negative action.
Right. Let's say you have a colleague who just threw you under the bus in a meeting.
Okay, yes, you go back to your desk and you feel the overwhelming temptation to draft a highly toxic, career-damaging email about them and send it to your mutual boss. You want revenge.
You can feel the heat of that anger in your chest.
Exactly. The temptation draws all that latent negativity, all that unhealed anger and need for external power right up to the surface of your consciousness.
But here's the compassionate part. Because it is only a temptation, you have the opportunity to conquer it internally.
You can sit at your desk, feel the rage, recognize it as an unhealed aspect of your spacesuit, and choose to process and release it in the privacy of your own mind.
You don't hit send on the email.
You conquer the energy internally without having to actually act it out, damage the other person's career, and create massive real-world karmic debt that you will inevitably have to balance later.
It's a decoy.
Yes. It is specifically designed to draw out the splintered, unhealed parts of your personality so you can see them clearly. If you face the temptation, look at it, and choose your soul's wisdom over your personality's fear, you heal that aspect of yourself without having to spill that toxicity into the physical world.
It's an incredibly gracious opportunity to evolve through internal wisdom rather than being forced to evolve through the painful, messy consequences of negative actions.
It returns the locus of control and the power of choice entirely to the individual. Every time you feel that pull of temptation, it is the universe knocking on your door saying, here is an unhealed part of your energy.
Do you want to heal it now, consciously and internally, or do you want to act it out and learn the hard way through the density of karmic consequence?
I love that framing. It strips away the shame of having dark thoughts. The thought isn't the failure, it's the curriculum. Moving on, I want us to anchor these massive cosmic concepts into our daily realities by looking at some specific pivotal quotes from the text. We have 4 quotes to analyze. Let's start with this one. Quote 1. For many of us, being held responsible is equal to getting caught.
That is perhaps the most accurate, piercing distillation of the 5-sensory mindset I have ever heard.
It really calls us out. The text shares this great anecdote to illustrate it. There's a story about a man examining his family's dinner bill at an Italian restaurant. He finds a scribbled item on the receipt that roughly translates to, if it goes, it goes.
He asks the waiter what the charge is for.
The waiter looks at it, shrugs, and just says, it didn't go, and crosses it off. It was an arbitrary charge the restaurant added just to see if they could get away with it.
This perfectly illustrates how humans normally view consequences and responsibility. We think if the cashier gives us a $20 bill instead of the 10, and we walk out of the store without them noticing, we've won.
We beat the system. We only feel responsible if the cashier yells, hey, wait, and we get caught.
But contrasted with the inescapable law of karma we just discussed, that mindset is entirely delusional. You cannot get away with anything because every single intention sets energetic physics into motion.
You are partaking of the fruit of your every intention, whether anyone in the physical world catches you or not. The universe is the ultimate infallible accountant.
Let's look at the second quote, which scales this concept up dramatically. Quote 2. There is no difference between acute schizophrenia and a world at war.
This speaks to the macro and micro concept of consciousness, and I have to admit, when I first read this, I needed to pause. How do we connect a clinical psychiatric condition to a global geopolitical conflict?
It connects them by identifying the exact same energetic root cause, the splintered psyche of an individual who is competing for external power. An individual whose internal aspects are at war with one another for dominance, survival, and control is the exact same dynamic as nations fighting over physical borders.
The argument is that the fear, the paranoia, and the perception of power as an external resource to be hoarded, which separate a husband and wife in a bitter, destructive divorce, are the exact same energies that separate warring nations.
A world at war is not a political failure. It is the collective manifestation of billions of splintered, unhealed souls projecting their internal conflicts outward onto the global stage. The macrocosm perfectly, flawlessly reflects the microcosm.
That brings a crushing weight of responsibility to individual healing. If my internal road rage is the exact same energy that fuels a border war, then my choice to heal my anger is a global imperative.
It is.
Okay, let's move to quote 3. Process is honored in reverence. I really want to unpack this concept of reverence because the text draws a very sharp, distinct line between reverence and respect.
It does, and it's a vital distinction. In our daily language, we use those words interchangeably, but they are vastly different energetic postures.
Think about respect. Respect is fundamentally a judgment. It's conditional. You respect someone because they possess qualities that your particular culture or personality admires.
Maybe they're a hard worker, or they're highly intelligent, or they achieved a great deal of wealth.
But those admired qualities change from culture to culture and generation to generation. A corporate CEO might be respected in one culture and despised in another. You can respect one person and completely disrespect another.
Reverence, however, is not a judgment. It does not look at the resume of the personality. Reverence is engaging in a depth of contact with life that goes way beyond the shell of physical form.
It is the ability to see the divine essence, the immortal soul, beneath the exterior of every person, every animal, and every plant. Because it recognizes the soul, you cannot revere one person without revering all people.
So when the text says process is honored in reverence, it means approaching the entire messy, often painful unfolding of life, the maturation process of every single soul, even the ones making terrible, destructive mistakes, with an attitude that honors the sacredness of their journey.
You revere the process of their evolution, even if you do not respect their current actions.
And if we lack that reverence, we end up suffering endlessly through our judgments. Which ties perfectly to our fourth quote.
Quote 4. We learn the effect of putting a finger in a light socket, and we do not repeat the cause that produces that effect. Learning that intentions produce specific effects proceeds slowly when our learning must be done solely through the density of physical matter.
This quote is the master key to understanding why human beings suffer through repeated painful patterns. If a toddler touches a hot stove or puts a finger in a light socket, they get burned or shocked.
The physical feedback is instantaneous and undeniable. They instantly learn the cause and effect, and they do not do it again.
But spiritual feedback, karmic feedback, does not move at the speed of electricity. It moves through the incredibly dense, slow medium of physical matter and time.
So if my unconscious intention is manipulation or a need to control others, the effect of that intention, which is isolation, distrust, and hostile interactions, might not manifest immediately.
Or, more likely, it manifests slowly, and you blame it on the other person's flaws.
Because the feedback is so slow and dense, a person might have to suffer through 50 failed relationships or get fired from 15 different jobs over the course of decades before they are finally beaten down enough to realize, oh, wait, the common denominator in all of these disasters is my own fearful, controlling intention.
We learn at an agonizingly slow pace when we only rely on the 5 physical senses to interpret the results of our energetic actions.
It highlights the inefficiency of the 5 sensory path. Awakening to multisensory perception allows you to see the energetic cause and effect before it has to manifest as 50 ruined relationships.
That is such a powerful realization. It makes you want to audit your intentions daily.
Now, the connections this text makes to other established disciplines are striking. Let's look at the connection to science, specifically physics. You touched on this earlier, but I want to go deeper, because it grounds this mystical talk in hard science.
The connections to physics are profound and quite literal. The text explicitly connects the spiritual law of karma to Sir Isaac Newton's third law of motion. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction.
Zukav posits that this isn't just a convenient poetic metaphor. He argues that the laws of physics are the literal physical reflection of non-physical spiritual laws.
The balancing of kinetic energy in the physical domain is a direct, dense mirror of the balancing of karmic energy in the spiritual domain. Furthermore, the concept that our intentions shape our reality connects directly to quantum mechanics.
Wait, let's pause there. Quantum mechanics is incredibly dense. Can you translate that connection into plain English for those of us who haven't been in a physics classroom lately? How does an intention connect to quantum theory?
Yeah, absolutely. In quantum mechanics, there is a fundamental principle called the observer effect. Without getting bogged down in the math, experiments like the famous double-slit experiment show that subatomic particles, the building blocks of matter, exist in a state of probability.
They act like a wave of potential.
Yes. But the very act of observation, the presence and intention of the experimenter measuring them, causes them to collapse into a specific measurable particle. The consciousness of the observer is inseparable from the physical reality being observed. The matter literally responds to being watched.
Zukav takes this quantum principle and applies it to the soul. Our consciousness, our deep intentions are the observing force. We are literally collapsing the quantum wave function of the universe's potential to create the specific, solid events of our personal realities.
It's basically saying that quantum physics is just the universe slowly, methodically proving ancient spirituality with mathematics.
That is incredible, and the text doesn't just look at physics. It takes a rather hard swing at traditional psychology as well. The critique here is that modern psychology, as it is currently practiced, only studies the personality.
It focuses entirely on cognition, perception, behavior modification, and effect. It tries to heal a person's deep suffering by analyzing and tweaking the artificial persona.
Yes, the text argues strongly for the creation of what it calls spiritual psychology, a discipline that recognizes the immortal soul as the true core of the human being.
The argument is that you cannot fully heal a splintered personality with traditional therapy or psychiatric medicine alone, because the personality is just an instrument. It uses a brilliant analogy to explain this. Trying to fix the personality without addressing the soul is like trying to fix a piano when the piano player is deeply depressed.
Let's visualize that. You can bring in the best piano tuner in the world. You can adjust the tension of every string, polish the keys, fix the pedals, which is what traditional therapy or medication does. It tunes the instrument.
But if the musician sitting on the bench is filled with absolute grief and sorrow, the music they play will still sound like sorrow no matter how perfectly the piano is tuned.
Precisely. Spiritual psychology would recognize that a psychosis, a severe breakdown, or chronic depression is ultimately a shattered spirit. It must be healed at the level of karmic energy and soul alignment, not just by adjusting the biological or cognitive dials of the spacesuit.
Now, connecting this framework to modern society and history, the text is incredibly bold. It looks at the structures we have built: patriarchy, matriarchy, police badges, military weapons, corporate hierarchies, wealth accumulation, and identifies them all as symbols of fear.
They're all external manifestations of our terror. The text explicitly states that a police uniform or a military rank is produced by the perception of power as external.
And those who wear them and those who fear them are both operating under the shared illusion that power can be hoarded, formalized, and used to control the physical world.
And it extends this analysis to major historical and geopolitical conflicts. Zukav cites massive defining conflicts like capitalism versus communism, the historical strife between Irish Catholics and Protestants, the enduring conflicts between Jews and Arabs, and even specific localized historical events like the assassination of JFK by Lee Harvey Oswald.
Now, it's fascinating, and we should be exceptionally clear here. We are looking at this purely through the philosophical lens of the book. We're not taking any political stance, validating any historical narrative, or endorsing any ideology on our part. We are strictly impartial reporters of this text.
Thank you for stating that so clearly. Yes, Zukav uses these deeply charged conflicts as overarching examples of this splintered psychology. The assertion is that all such conflicts, regardless of the incredibly complex specific ideologies, religious doctrines, or historical grievances involved, are ultimately driven by the exact same underlying energetic dynamic, the illusion of external power and the primal fear that fuels it.
It acts as a unifying theory of human conflict. The argument is that the secondary game behind all ideological, religious, or geographical conflict is the deep-seated desire to dominate the physical environment and other people to assure one's own survival.
It suggests that until humanity collectively shifts its pursuit from external power to authentic power, the names of the nations and the locations of the borders will change, the ideologies will morph, but the underlying splintering of the human psyche will continue to produce the exact same cycles of violence.
That brings us to a point where we really need to exercise some critical thinking. Because while this book is incredibly profound and offers a beautiful vision for human potential, there are elements of this philosophy that are highly challenging.
And frankly, deeply controversial when applied to the gritty reality of human history.
Yeah.
I want to bring up the hardest part of the text to swallow. The author states that we should not judge any suffering.
And he does not shy away from extreme cases.
The text specifically mentions the horrific cruelty of the Inquisition, the unimaginable atrocities of the Holocaust, the tragic death of an infant, or the despair of a person sleeping in a freezing winter gutter. It asserts that we cannot judge these events because they are all karmic balancing acts, ultimately chosen by those souls for their own complex evolution.
This raises an important question, and it is absolutely vital that we push back and offer alternative interpretations here. The philosophy Zukav presents is clearly designed to encourage radical acceptance and to entirely remove the concept of victimhood from human consciousness.
From a purely metaphysical, abstract standpoint, it empowers the individual. It says you are an immortal soul on an eternal learning journey, and nothing in the physical world can truly destroy your essence.
However, when you apply this metaphysical absolute to the physical world, it can sound incredibly dangerously dismissive of real-world systemic oppression and horrific human suffering.
It really does. It skirts dangerously close to victim blaming if it is misunderstood or misapplied by the five-sensory mind. Think about the implications. If we look at a marginalized group suffering under a brutal genocidal dictatorship and say, well, we can't judge this, we must have reverence for their process, it's just their karma balancing out, we risk doing something terrible.
We risk absolving the oppressors of their moral responsibility in the physical realm, and we risk justifying our own apathy and inaction.
And that is the critical caveat that listeners must wrestle with. Spiritual bypassing is a real danger here. One can hold deep spiritual compassion, practice reverence for the immortal journey of the soul, and still actively, fiercely fight injustice in the physical world.
You do not have to adopt a passive, apathetic, it's just karma stance. You can accept that a soul is on a complex curriculum while still using your physical existence to stop someone from inflicting pain.
In fact, fighting for justice with a heart full of compassion and reverence for all life rather than a heart full of hatred and vengeance toward the oppressor might be the absolute highest expression of authentic power. The profound danger lies in using the concept of karma as a philosophical excuse to turn a blind eye to cruelty.
I think that's a crucial distinction. You can believe in a spiritual curriculum without checking your physical humanity and your moral courage at the door.
Moving forward, let's look at the big ideas that emerge from all of this. What is the ultimate, overarching worldview of this book?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the ultimate worldview presented in The Seed of the Soul is that the physical world is an illusion.
But we have to clarify what that word means in this context. It does not mean the world doesn't exist or that pain isn't real.
Right. It is an illusion in the sense that it is a temporary, highly constructed, densely vibrating school. It is a stage designed entirely for the evolution of the soul. We come here to act out our karmic imbalances in a slow, dense environment until we finally learn, through trial and error, to choose love over fear.
And what I find beautiful and somewhat dizzying is how the text layers this collective consciousness. You aren't just an isolated individual stumbling through this planetary school. You are part of massive, interconnected group souls.
Yes, the concept of the inverted pyramid of reality. Picture an upside-down pyramid. At the very bottom point, the narrowest part, is your personal reality. That is your specific, intimate life, your job, your immediate relationships, your daily thoughts.
But as you move up the inverted pyramid, the layers expand and become broader and more inclusive. You are intrinsically part of the collective consciousness of your family.
Move higher, and you are part of the soul of your city, your nation. Moving even higher, you are part of the group soul of your gender, your race, and ultimately, at the very top, the widest part of the pyramid, the macro soul of the entire human species.
And the staggering implication of this geometric model is that every single choice you make at the bottom point of the pyramid sends energetic ripples all the way to the top.
When you, in the absolute privacy of your own home, choose to respond to an insult from a spouse with forgiveness and curiosity instead of lashing out in anger, you are not just improving your evening.
You are literally lightening the karmic load of the entire human species. You are slightly altering the frequency of the macro soul. You are never acting alone.
It gives an immense weight, dignity, and purpose to the most mundane choices of daily life. Your private, unseen victories over temptation are literally global victories.
I want to weave in some thoughtful discussion questions here. As we cover these concepts, I'm going to pose 5 questions directly to you, the listener. You don't need to answer them right now. Take these to your next dinner party, bring them to your book club, or just mull them over while you do the dishes. Let these ideas marinate. Question number 1. If authentic power means you are entirely incapable of making anyone a victim, how authentic is the power of our current world leaders, billionaires, and cultural icons?
That is a profound lens through which to view modern politics and celebrity culture. It reveals how much of our society is built on the worship of extreme vulnerability masquerading as strength.
Question number 2. How would your daily life change tomorrow if you viewed your deepest, most shameful temptations, the thoughts you would never say out loud, not as moral failures that make you a bad person, but as compassionate dress rehearsals designed by the universe to protect you from creating bad karma?
It would certainly evaporate a massive amount of the chronic guilt and shame that paralyzes so many people.
Question number 3. Can you identify a specific area in your life right now where you are actively pursuing external power out of a hidden fear of vulnerability? Is it your bank account, your workout routine, the way you manage your team at work?
That requires looking past the socially acceptable excuses we use to justify our ambitions and finding the root fear.
We'll save the last 2 questions for a bit later as they tie into some upcoming concepts, but let's move into practical reflection. So what does this all mean? How do we apply these massive cosmic ideas to the gritty, painful reality of real life? The text provides a phenomenal framework for this by analyzing the anatomy of addiction.
This is where the rubber meets the road. The paradigm shift here is that addiction, whether to alcohol, drugs, gambling, or even more subtle addictions like an addiction to sex or an addiction to destructive emotions like rage or chronic self-pity, is not viewed primarily as a moral failing.
And it is not viewed purely as a physical disease. In this framework, addiction is a power leak. It is the personality desperately trying to fill a profound spiritual void with physical matter or intense external experiences.
So let's look at the text's analysis of sexual addiction, because it points out that sexual addictions are the most universal in our species. Why? Because they are so deeply tied to the core issues of external power and domination.
The analysis here is incredibly confronting. The text asserts that if you are acting out sexually without any authentic emotional connection or reverence for the other person, you are essentially using a weakness detection system.
That phrase is striking. Let's visualize that. Imagine someone at a bar or a party, driven by this kind of addiction. They aren't looking for a partner. They're scanning the room, looking for someone weak enough, insecure enough, or wounded enough to be easily seduced.
Why? Because successfully seducing them, conquering them, gives the terrified, powerless personality a temporary, fleeting illusion of power. It's preying on a weaker soul to mask your own profound feelings of powerlessness. You drain their energy to temporarily plug the leak in your own soul.
It is a dark, predatory dynamic when viewed energetically. But the practical advice the text gives for overcoming this or any addiction, from alcohol to anger, is remarkably clear and empowering.
It tells you to recognize that in the exact moment of temptation, the moment the craving hits, you are standing between two worlds. You are standing between your lesser self and your whole self.
The lesser self, the splintered personality, wants the quick, unconscious relief of the addiction. It wants to go back to sleep. The whole self, the soul, demands the hard, painful work of conscious life.
And every single time you feel that craving and you make the agonizing choice to resist it, you are performing an act of spiritual physics. You literally pull energy away from the addiction and integrate it back into your authentic self.
The text says, each time you choose otherwise, you disengage the power of your addiction more and more and increase your personal power. You have to realize that you are entirely responsible for your choices.
The universe is putting an obstacle in your path, the craving that is exactly proportional to the inadequacy in your soul, so that by overcoming it, you build the specific muscle you need to become whole.
It entirely removes the excuse of powerlessness. It tells the addict you are not a helpless victim of a disease. You are an immortal, incredibly powerful soul. Your addiction is a crude tool your personality is using to avoid the responsibility of spiritual growth. Claim your power, face the emotional pain consciously instead of numbing it, and the energetic structure of the addiction will inevitably disintegrate.
We are entering the final phase of our deep dive, and this is where we get into the weird, deeply mysterious, and esoteric elements of the book. Because Zukav doesn't just stick to psychological frameworks and quantum physics metaphors. He dives deep into the mystical. Let's talk about the spiritual ecology of the animal kingdom.
Yes, the concept of animal group souls. This is a fascinating departure from how we usually view animals. The text asserts that animals do not have individual, distinct souls the way humans do.
There is no individual immortal soul for your pet dog or a specific wild buffalo or a single bird. Instead, all members of a species share one giant, expansive sphere of impersonal energy, the group soul.
The analogy he uses for this is quite beautiful. He compares a group soul to the mouth of the Mississippi River. At the mouth, where it meets the ocean, it's a massive, collective, undefined body of water.
But as you move up the river into the continent, it narrows and splinters off into countless specific streams and points. The individual animal you see in the physical world is just a tiny, temporary manifestation of that massive group energy extending its fingers into physical matter.
And that leads to a deeply poignant and frankly very strange assertion about dolphins. Zukav addresses the phenomenon of dolphins inexplicably beaching themselves in large numbers.
When this happens, marine biologists usually look for physical causes: sonar interference from submarines, toxic algae blooms, or disease. Zukav, however, views this through an energetic lens. He says the dolphins are doing this not as an act of mass suicide, but out of profound spiritual exhaustion.
He claims that the dolphin the macro energy of that entire species, was meant to be a bridge of joy, unconditional love, and high intelligence between the aquatic kingdom and humanity.
But because humanity has met that energetic bridge with sheer brutality, ocean pollution, drift nets, and slaughter, the dolphin soul is essentially refusing to continue the experiment. It is exhausted by our density. It is voluntarily withdrawing its energy and leaving the Earth.
It is a tragic, highly mystical interpretation of an ecological crisis. And the text goes so far as to literally ask the reader to mentally send comforting thoughts to the dolphin soul.
It asks you to project the thought, "I'm one who understands," into the collective consciousness to ease their grieving journey as they exit our reality. It demands a level of spiritual empathy and telepathic connection that is completely foreign and probably sounds absurd to the strict five-sensory logic.
It really does sound absurd if you are purely grounded in material science, but within the logic of the book, it makes perfect tragic sense.
Which brings us to question number 4 for you to mull over. If the text is right and animals have collective group souls while humans have individual souls, does this shift change how you view your relationship with nature, ecology, and the food you eat? Does a forest feel different if it's all one soul?
Another highly mystical element we must touch on is how the text reinterprets the biblical story of the Garden of Eden. It completely discards the literal interpretation. It treats Adam and Eve not as historical figures and not even just as a moral fable about disobedience, but as a representation of fundamental energy dynamics.
Right. Adam and Eve represent the male and female energy principles within the nascent human species. And the apple from the tree of knowledge wasn't a piece of fruit that God arbitrarily forbade them to eat.
No, the apple represents the exact archetypal moment the human species made the collective free will choice to misuse its emerging consciousness. It was the fork in the evolutionary road.
It was the moment we chose to learn about reality through fear, doubt, and domination, rather than learning through wisdom and trust. By misusing knowledge to exert control, we created the vibration of shame. Shame gave birth to guilt, and guilt inevitably gave birth to fear.
That single energetic choice set humanity on a billions of years evolutionary path defined by the brutal pursuit of external power.
So the fall wasn't a punishment from a wrathful God kicking us out of paradise. It was the natural, inescapable karmic consequence of a species choosing to evolve through the dense, painful, terrifying path of fear. We built our own exile.
Exactly. And finally, to assist us on this incredibly difficult path we chose, the text discusses the constant, unseen presence of angels and non-physical guides. It asserts with absolute certainty that we are never alone. We are constantly surrounded by teachers who exist in realms of light, operating at frequencies far beyond our five-sensory perception.
And it defines angels in a fascinating, specific way. An angel is not just a human with wings. The distinction is that an angel does not have a splintered personality. A human has a soul, but an angel is its soul.
It is pure, unfragmented, fully integrated light, working tirelessly to assist us as we stumble blindly through the dense illusion of time and physical matter.
It paints a picture of a universe that is not a cold, dead void, but rather a space teeming with compassionate, highly evolved intelligence, all working in concert to help the human soul awaken from its fearful slumber and reclaim its authentic power.
And that leads to our fifth and final discussion question. Based on everything we've covered, what is the practical difference in your life between a true need of your soul and an artificial need of your personality? If you can learn to distinguish between the two, your entire life changes.
What a profound, mind-bending journey this has been. From defining the necessary evolutionary shift away from external power to understanding karma not as punishment, but as spiritual physics, to unearthing the energetic roots of our deepest addictions, and finally looking at the mystical ecology of group souls and unfragmented light.
The central unifying takeaway here is so incredibly empowering. Every single moment of anger, grief, frustration, or temptation you experience is not a punishment. It is not bad luck. It is a vital opportunity. It is a compassionate invitation from the universe to align your temporary, frightened personality with the vast wisdom of your immortal soul.
Every single choice to act with reverence and love instead of reacting with fear and judgment literally alters the frequency of the human species. You are that powerful.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something to take with you as you step back into the noise of your day. The text tells us to take our hands off the steering wheel and trust the deeper currents of the universe. It sounds passive, but it's actually the ultimate act of courage.
So ask yourself this. If you truly, deeply, at the core of your being, believe that every single obstacle, every annoying coworker, every devastating heartbreak, and every frustrating delay in your path was meticulously, lovingly placed there by your own soul to teach you how to love, who would you possibly be angry at tomorrow?
A beautiful, disruptive question to carry forward.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep wrestling with these ideas. Until next time, keep your mind open and take care of each other.